All right, excited to be here today with a new friend, Toni Malyn. Toni is the head of marketing at EmuBands. He leads the marketing strategies for their digital music distribution service that helps artists, labels, managers to retain control of their music and 100% of the royalties. They focus on providing cost-effective distribution solutions and supercharged release features for independent music creators. And I'm really excited to connect with them today a little bit about the landscape around being an independent artist. What are some strategies for effectively distributing your music and maximizing the royalties, especially when it's easier than ever to create high quality music in home studios? How do you actually distribute it effectively and do it in a way that you have real ownership? So, Tony, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael. Pleased to be here. Yeah.
Absolutely. So to kick things off, for anyone who this is their first time meeting you or connecting with you, could you share a little bit about yourself and also about EmuBands and what was sort of like the main problem that you guys set out to serve?
Sure. So yeah, I'll speak a little bit about EmuBands first, and then I can talk about like how I came to be involved in it, right? But like EmuBands today, so formed in 2005, is based in Glasgow in Scotland, which is like where I'm from. But we service the entire world. So we've got staff in Germany, Spain. I'm out in New York. We've got one single member of staff in Mexico. So yeah, we're very much a global business. It was started in 2005 by my boss, Ali Gray. So he's like the co-founder of the company. He was managing artists himself, worked for an independent distributor called Rights Router in the UK. But we're going way back here, like sort of dot-com boom type like era. So very early days for digital distribution. At the time, even if you were an independent artist, you still had to use a company like Rights Router, you had to get a label to do the licensing for you. You couldn't just license directly with the distributor. And I think my boss, when he was managing artists, he found it frustrating that although he worked for an independent distributor, he actually couldn't get those artists through that company because he needed a third party to license it, right? So he came up with that idea of being that company that can do the licensing, like a super simple one pager, like you retain all your rights, you keep all your royalties, and we will do all the work for you on like a simple flat fee basis. So that's kind of the ethos that started EmuBands, and that's almost like 20 years later, like that's still what drives the company. So it's a flat fee per release, right? There's no subscriptions to keep your music live or anything like that. You retain 100% of the rights and you keep 100% of the royalties. How I became involved in EmuBands, let's start from how I even got into music, right? Like most people, I started out as a musician. So I grew up playing a lot of jazz. I spoke to my parents, said I wanted to play guitar, and I think they were like, well, if we're going to send you for lessons, you have to go and learn like real music, right? Or whatever. So I learned jazz music. And I think when you're like a kid, I love jazz music now, but when I was a kid, I don't think I super loved it. I wanted to play the music that my dad was listening to. So like everything from like the Sex Pistols, the Who, Van Morrison, like not jazz at all. So like when I was 16, 17, I was making music with buddies at high school, like not very good music, but like I wanted to work out ways to release it. So around 2009, I'm looking at ways to get our stuff onto, I guess, iTunes at the time, right? Like streaming wasn't really like a huge thing then. And I was amazed to find that there was this company in my home city that did that thing, right? I was sort of like expecting it to be someone in North America or someone in London or whatever. So I was happy that it was a Glasgow company that I was using. So that company was EmuBands. I started out as a customer. I loved the service and how easy it was to get my music released. Once I left high school, I had this idea that I wanted to become a high school music teacher, right? So I applied for like the conservatoire in Scotland. And as a kind of backup, I applied for music business school. And when it came down to it, I sort of asked myself, do I really want to sit in high school classrooms for the rest of my life? And the answer was like, no way, right? Like I was done with school. So I studied commercial music at university and picked up some work as a session musician, which allowed me I traveled all over Europe playing mostly in like Irish folk bands and things like that, and worked as a tour manager a little bit. And then as part of my university course, I had to seek out a work placement or internship, but it was very much like they wanted you to go and do some office-based music work, so I couldn't really do live stuff. And I sent EmuBands a DM on Twitter in 2011, and the rest is history. Like, it was a small company at the time. I mean, like, 2 people in the office when I turned up, and one of them was the co-founder, Ali. He's still at MD today, and like, he's really been an incredible mentor to me through the years. My internship was only supposed to last for a couple of weeks, and then I ended up taking on some part-time paid work with them when I was at uni, and then went full-time after I got my degree. By that point, there was like a handful of other people working at the company, but really only 4 or 5 people. So I started out in artist relations, and then gradually I moved into marketing. And the company's really allowed like me to find my feet and follow passions that I have. So like, I blend like the creative and business skills and lead those marketing strategies at EmuBands. And so my role today, like, I now oversee all the partnerships. I build the internal systems for pitching music to DSPs and craft campaigns with artists that help them connect with audiences globally. And that, I get like extreme satisfaction working with the artists and labels at our company. And, you know, even better, I get to sort of like help bring more people into the sort of EmuBands family, and, you know, really just speak to them on a daily basis and make sure that we're delivering the best distribution service for them. But yeah, I think that just about covers how I ended up there and what EmuBands does. Basically, we have a ton of really experienced people who work at the company. Everything's handled in-house, so we're fully independent. We're kind of not really relying on third parties to do the delivery work. I don't know if like your listeners really know the really boring stuff about distributors, but like, a lot of distributors will need to work with a third party. I mean, they're great companies, but like companies like Thuga or any of these places, they provide the actual delivery part for other distributors, but we don't really require that. We have all that in-house. We do all the delivery, we do all the artist relations, the marketing work, and a lot of our deals are direct with the DSPs as well. So we're kind of like able to be ensuring that we're providing the most amount of money possible for our artists and our labels, and we can work quicker and we're more nimble than a lot of other distributors in the space.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a really nice holistic approach, to the distribution game. Yeah, as someone who you've worked with a lot of artists and record labels now, with the company, and you're head of marketing, so you've probably witnessed a lot of evolution and kind of change in terms of the general landscape of the music industry, how it's marketed, how it's distributed over time. I'm curious, what do you see as sort of the biggest challenges of the times right now that artists are struggling with? And then we can have a conversation about some strategies and creative ways that you've seen them overcome them.
Sure, right. I mean, it feels like today it's just like the most saturated digital market that's ever existed, right? Like, so I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is specifically from like our end of it. It's just like a new artist with no fan base, putting their stuff up onto DSPs is like a total drop in the ocean, right? It's just so difficult to gain any visibility outside your friends and family or whatever, right? So like, there's so much music's being released daily, capturing and maintaining that audience attention, it's going to be just incredibly difficult. So unless you've got that backing of a major label or extensive marketing resources, it's just really, really, you're fighting an uphill battle, right? Like, so the shift towards streaming's been transformative, but it also means that artists have to be more strategic about how they release music and engage with fans. And I'm a big data guy, so like leveraging data to understand our audience's listening behaviors and how they're interacting with them. It can be like a really significant tool you can use to your advantage. Another really big issue, though, I think, is this shrinking middle class of musicians. Many artists are like under immense pressure to create like infinite levels of content for social media, and it can detract from that time and energy needed to actually do what they're good at, like creating that music, making great art. And at the same time, touring's become more expensive and less lucrative at that kind of lower end. So it creates these additional barriers for artists trying to sustain a career. And these combined factors make it harder for musicians to build long-term stability, especially those who aren't operating at the top tier of the industry.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that, although it's a blessing to have the easy ability to create music and release it on the internet, there's so much music now, it's become so saturated that actually cutting through the noise and getting visibility has become challenging. And that's kind of also led to this shrinking middle class where kind of having that breakthrough, there's a thick threshold to kind of like cut through. And yeah, that makes it difficult to compete. Yeah, when you're at just the beginning, you don't already have an audience. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'd be curious to hear from your experience, what are some of the biggest opportunities that musicians have right now to be able to kind of cut through that veil? And especially if they're just starting out and they don't have an existing audience or fan base, how do they get that initial spark?
Sure. So I think firstly, obviously I do think that building that core team around you of people to support you can be really important. And I think there's a lot of people that think maybe it can be too early a time to get a manager involved or whatever. Some people sometimes think, let's wait a bit. I completely understand that school of thought. I think that if you're looking to release music on your own, look for a distributor who's going to be there sort of holding your hand if you need it, right? Like someone that you can pick up the phone to as well is super important. I think there's a lot of really low cost solutions to distributing your music, which is great, of course, but a lot of these low cost services rely on a lot of automation and they're not really designed for you to communicate with a human being through that process, right? So it's one thing that we always really try and pride ourselves on is that we have real humans speaking to people. We've got you can call us if you need to call us, but we have a live chat system on our dashboard. But you also develop relationships, so everyone has that direct contact with our artist relations team to give them advice on really anything that they any questions that they have, right? But in terms of a kind of wider industry perspective, not just the distribution side of it, I think artists need to adopt a kind of more strategic approach that integrates their creativity with that pursuit to a sort of sustainable career, right? So diversifying income streams is crucial. So musicians who aren't household names can't really rely solely on streaming or touring. Exploring opportunities in merch or sync licensing, fan subscriptions, and these kind of unique partnerships can create a bit more stability for them. Additionally, artists really should focus on building deeper connections with their audience, no matter what size that audience is, right? It's that kind of thing of would you rather 1,000, passive listeners or 100 listeners who are prepared to spend $25 on your vinyl, right? No brainer, you know what you want, right? The smaller audience is way better in that regard. So just focusing on that about those deeper connections with the audience and rather than chasing fleeting virality, right? So direct to fan platforms or it's old fashioned, but the mailing list is still so important. It's so cheap and but it's just that you can own that method of speaking to your audience, right? You don't really own the data that's on social media. You're not really fully in control of being able to target who you want to target, that kind of thing. I mean, there's some great tools out there that are sort of other than just your traditional email, but companies like OpenStage are great at allowing artists to manage that connection between them and their fans at every level of their career. So yeah, fostering more meaningful relationships can sort of lead to that consistent support over time. On the content side, streamlining and repurposing content, I know I mentioned earlier just that you're having to constantly create content, but I think you can use, instead of having 30 different bits of content, you can really just get inventive with the 5 bits of content that you've got and make it last over time, right? You don't need to constantly create new material and adapt it for different platforms. So that's something that I speak to my artists about a lot. For touring, I think kind of smaller tours with a focus on high value locations can help artists avoid the high cost of larger circuits, and you're still engaging fans at that level. And working with local promoters or organizations can also make touring more financially viable, and it's better for the wider ecosystem at the end of the day. And lastly, industry-wide advocacy is really, really important. So more equitable streaming models, financial support for touring, government grants or whatever's out there, and mentorship programs for emerging artists. I think we kind of all collectively have to help rebuild that middle class in music.
Good stuff, man. I mean, definitely speaking my language. We have a software platform that we've been developing for the past year internally for our coaching clients called Street Team. And really the idea of the software is exactly what you're talking about helping fans directly connect with artists. It's sort of like if Patreon and Discord and Facebook groups had a baby. It would be like this platform, and 100% about ownership, between the data, the artist and their fan. The fact that you don't know who your people really are on Spotify or even on Facebook. You don't own the audience. Like Mark Zuckerberg owns your audience, and so
Yeah.
there's built-in email sending, there's built-in chat communication, subscriptions, and so depending on when people are listening to this, we're doing a big launch for Straight Team in January next year, and so I'm really excited to share that with more people. Right now, it's been just for our clients working with internally, but it's 100% to help with the issues that you just brought up because we've experienced those as well.
Dude, that sounds awesome. Yeah. And anything like that at all is, I get music to my ears too. So yeah, sounds great.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to stick around after the conversation, do a quick demo of the platform. But cool. So as it relates to monetization, right now is kind of an interesting time where streaming is more accessible than ever. People can, potentially monetize their streaming, but it seems like that's also a big challenge. People touring, playing live shows can be profitable, but also really expensive to kind of get started with. Maybe could we go a little bit deeper on the fan subscription idea? Because that's part of the core of the Street Team platform is having the fan subscription. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on how does an artist build the types of relationships that we're talking about that kind of go beyond just like a casual listener, but actually a real relationship and someone that supports the artist financially on one of those membership tiers.
Yeah, totally. Great question. I think just for anyone that who's maybe listening that isn't familiar with those types of services or solutions, like fan subscription models, I guess, are like your own little distribution network where it's like you've got your private fan club, right? You're speaking to your fans directly. I mean, I've seen people do this on like Patreon, but other services as well. But they can be great because I mean, at the end of the day, it's providing you with direct revenue, right? So fans are paying a recurring fee, like, I mean, maybe a couple of bucks a month or something like that, like to support you and what you're doing. And in exchange, they're getting exclusive content or perks. And it might actually also allow you to like test out music that you maybe don't really want to like release to absolutely everyone just yet as well, right? So it's like it can be that you're rewarding them with exclusive content that only they're getting, but also like you could also maybe think of it as like a focus group of like people who really know and understand your music. Like they're like the best people to test this stuff out on. So just building that community of people, regular personalized content as well is like really good to strengthen that relationship with them. And from an artist perspective, I guess it also gives that predictability of like a fixed income, right? Like you know what's going to come in every other month or whatever. So it's a win-win in that regard. I guess you can also do like, behind the scenes footage, demo recordings, like songwriting processes. It depends on, I guess, the size of your fan base, but like live streaming Q&A sessions and things like that can really work too. It can turn people into super fans, which is like, again, it kind of gets back to that, like having those like 100 super fans is more worthwhile than being added to a fleeting Spotify playlist where you maybe get 20,000 streams from 20,000 people, but they're not going to come to your shows or, do anything other than provide you with, maybe a decent whack of cash for 1 month from your distributor and then a little bit of a vanity metric on the DSPs. But it's just a better way, I think, I mean, artists at every level, but artists in the DIY space, it's got to be a really cost effective way to market their music, right?
100%. So it sounds like what you're saying is that really at the core of it is building a deeper relationship with those fans and providing, connection points so that maybe things like more personalization, like more connection around live streaming where you're actually saying their name, you're having conversations with them back and forth, early access to new demos or, more vulnerability, authenticity, because it's not the super polished, produced things. And, your true fans really appreciate that level of authenticity and being able to connect with you in a deeper way. It reminded me of one of our clients had been a supporter of Jacob Collier when Jacob was just getting started. And, Jacob is, I think, won several Grammy Awards now, and he's amazing. But one thing always stuck with me that he had done. So the client's name was Bob, and he was a supporter of Jacob Collier, and Jacob recorded a little like a music clip for him that was basically just him singing like harmony stacks where it's like Bob, 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 thank you, Bob, Bob, like something like that. And Bob like shared that with me, and he was so excited and so like proud of that little music clip. And that was a great example of like, just like that little piece of personalization and appreciation and recognition that he gave to him. And now that's something that Bob, can share with me. And, Jacob, he probably doesn't have the time or energy to be able to like do that kind of thing for his audience now. But it was something really special that he was able to create as a gift for Bob. That's a token of his appreciation. So it does seem like those kinds of things are so meaningful and powerful to that early adopter, that early fan who is the 1 in 100 kind of like true fans.
Yeah, totally. Of course, I think Jacob. Like, I mean, I don't work with Jacob, but I kind of admire that. Like, he is like actually a master of fan engagement, right? Like, I might mess this up a little bit, but I think he has these like viral like Instagram harmonization videos where like fans submit like melodies or ideas, and he basically turns them into like fully fledged compositions. I just think yes, he's super dynamic. Yeah, I think it's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really smart. Just in general, is the idea of like interaction and showcasing your fans, giving them recognition, put them in the spotlight, doing things musically for them. And just in general, like interaction. Like I know when I was touring full time with my band, like one of the best things that we ever did for our career and our community and just like the relationships we were building was after the shows, like coming out and meeting every single person and taking pictures with them and signing autographs and talking with them. That really is like part of the magic that makes the community grow and the interaction. And so, yeah, it just seemed like the more interaction you can do, the better it's going to be. As long as, I guess it depends on the interaction. If you're like slapping your fans in the face, like maybe not the best interaction, but sharing appreciation and having conversation seems like almost always the right thing.
For sure. Absolutely.
Awesome. I'm curious if you've seen any really unique things that artists have done for fans on like the high end in terms of the range of their subscriptions, sort of like a VIP fan experience. We've seen a lot of artists recently like doing clever or like kind of creative, high ticket kinds of experiences for their fans. We had an artist who did a retreat offer, and she basically had a $60,000 email that she sent out and sold out of spots in like a day and a half. And we were kind of crunching the numbers of what she would have needed to have in order to generate $60,000 with like a CD. And she would have needed like 300 some thousand people on her email list versus she had about 24,000. She made a $60,000, email. So I'm curious if you've seen anything in that world around like high ticket offers or high VIP fan experiences that might be creative.
I'm kind of drawing a little bit of a blank at that end. I'm trying to think. I might have to come back to it, but yeah, I think that's like what you just said is like it kind of shows you that that works with every level of artist out there, right? And especially if you have that globalized fan base, you might have super rich fans who are going to spend, 15, 20K on like a completely new composition or something, just dedicated to them. I sort of like think it's overdone a little bit to think of, everyone says like your band is a brand, right? But like it is true. So brands have stuff that sells for $10 and they have stuff that sells for $10,000. So why shouldn't artists, if they have the material that they can, go out and craft, and I think like you're going to find buyers for that in it. But I think you can't get to that level without fostering those super fans. Like you're going to need people to be so invested in your work and your story and like your artistry before they're going to part with those big figures.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the relationship is extremely important for making like a higher ticket offer like that. And I know for my band, like one of the first things that we did that really helped us get funding because we didn't have any money when we started out. We were like starving artists, and one of the things that we did that really helped a lot was these private parties and private events. We did like quinceañeras and house concerts and birthday parties, and we did those for thousands of dollars. And those were easily like one of the most lucrative things that we did. And we've had clients now who've done, $15,000 private events. And it does seem like sort of a limiting belief for a lot of artists that they think like, oh, well, I'm not worth that. Or who am I to like charge $5,000, $10,000 like to a fan? I only have 1,000, followers on Instagram. If that, I only have like 200 followers. Like, who am I? I'm not famous. But it is interesting. We've seen a lot of people who like are just getting started, and it doesn't really matter if they don't have millions of fans. But when they have like that offer with the right fan who really appreciates it, then you can still provide that type of value.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you said, the even when you're at that, I mean, there's still sizable numbers, but the lower end of that kind of thing where you're making maybe $2,000 on a show at a private party, like if you were working with like an agent and a promoter and a venue, like a traditional sort of downtown venue, like how many tickets would you have to sell before you're getting $2,000? It's going to be probably a lot more than the people that are at the private party, right? Like there's just so many mouths to feed when you involve, I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot here because I'm basically saying don't work with people who are in the industry because, it's like you're going to make less money. But yeah, I think that's, $2,000, $3,000 in an independent artist's pocket. Like you can do so much with that. And at that level, I think how long is it going to take for you to make that on streams, on like playing basement venues? It's going to take a long, long time. So like, yeah, those opportunities are out there to grab. Let's gets back to what I was saying about like diversifying your income streams. Like try everything out, see what happens, see what works.
Absolutely. Yeah, huge opportunity, just like direct to fan. And now we sort of have the ability to do those types of offers, but actually building the community or actually building the relationship seems like that's one of the more challenging parts of it. I'm curious in terms of like traffic generation. Like you're someone that has a lot of experience with marketing and running campaigns. And so, do you have any creative ideas for artists who are maybe just starting out and they want to generate traffic and they're like, yeah, how do I just even find the people in the first place and kind of build that initial introduction?
Sure, yeah. So like maybe you can help me when I'm speaking about this because I feel like you might be more eloquent at explaining what it is, but like fan funnels on social media, right? Like people that you're grabbing on TikTok, or I mean TikTok particularly, like because I feel like you can become exposed to so many people on that platform. I mean, it's not, I would say randomly, but it's not by mistake, of course not. It's like you kind of algorithms recommending it to people. You work with artists who are really, really good at moving those fans from TikTok onto DSPs that monetize the streams, right? Like TikTok's great, but you're not going to really make that much money from it if people, you're wanting to turn these people into like fans who buy or stream your music. And that can be as simple and as basic as just asking people to stream your music, but like you can come up with like sophisticated acquisition strategies, working with marketing teams on that. But bringing people in from all channels and turning those people from, you know, it's services that monetize poorly, like YouTube and TikTok, these things, to whether it is your Patreon or these kind of direct to fan platforms or the more traditional direct, like DSPs, you kind of want to sit down with some pros in that space to help you work that out.
Absolutely. Yeah. The concept of building a fan funnel and then meeting people where they're at. So it sounds like what you're saying is that, there's these social media platforms that have billions of people on them and fans. And so, if you start by releasing content that relates with people there, but also you don't just leave it there, but you actually have some sort of process for them to take them off of the platform and onto a platform that you own, like an email list or a fan funnel. And then from there, now you can build a deeper relationship and you own that data, you own the email as opposed to just being on Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg owning your audience.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I mean, like you said, it can be as simple as just an email address. Once you've got that email, you can keep talking to them, you can keep bugging them. Like, come over to Spotify, come over to like, my Patreon or whatever. Like, you've got them once you've got the email, in my opinion.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's, well, I don't know. In my world, like I see a lot of people talking about email because it's like, it's so obvious that like email is such a more powerful tool, to monetize your music and to build that community and to be able to stay connected with your fans. But it does seem like it's still sort of unappreciated in a lot of cases by artists who might not realize how important of a tool it is, or they just don't know how to use it properly. They might just kind of have something on their website, but they're not like actually, they don't have like a system for it. So definitely a huge opportunity to focus on.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's not, email's not as sexy as I mean, I don't think email's ever been sexy, but sometimes the best things aren't. So yeah, I don't know if it's, I don't know what your opinion is on it. I don't know if you feel like younger artists maybe think it's like super old fashioned, or I don't know like what the sort of like hesitance towards email is. But I mean, I'm also like, I know it's not like the one size fits all solution for everyone, but I mean, it's just like one of many tools that is still super impactful and low cost.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think the holdback for a lot of it kind of depends on the artist, but I think in some cases it's just that they're just not aware that there's an opportunity in the first place. Like they just think, yeah, they think email is sort of like old fashioned, or maybe like I think people don't use it as much as social media, which obviously isn't true. Like if you just look at any sort of marketing stats, like email, the return on email investment is like 37x versus like social media is like, between 1 to 5. And so I think maybe that's a part of it, just not understanding the opportunity or getting stuck with like just not really knowing like how do I actually use it correctly. Like maybe they've tried signing up for like MailChimp or some sort of like platform that feels kind of overwhelming and it's like all techy and there's like I don't really know like how do I actually use this. And maybe they've even like gone as far as setting up like an email list, but they haven't set up any like automations or anything with it to actually use it. They don't know where to start with it. But, I mean, absolutely, I couldn't recommend more, like, artists really invest some time into, like, learning how to use emails effectively, and that's, why we, focus on it so much with Street Team and with the education. Even in the podcast, you talk a lot about it with people like yourself.
Yeah, super important, 100% in the email camp. Yeah,
Awesome.
but I'm old, so that's why. Yeah.
Well, it's funny, like, even, I looked at some of the demographics for email, and, like, it's, like, one of the only platforms when you look across, like, all age ranges and, like, almost everyone has an email that they use, even, like, the youngsters. There's a lot of social media platforms that are, like, TikTok is, like, gears much more towards younger folks, and, Facebook is, like, will tend towards people who are older. But, like one of those things that's a really true like demographic across the board. Like everyone like has an email and we usually kind of use it as a private source of connection. So it's a great vehicle for business growth.
Absolutely.
Well, Tony, it's been great connecting with you today. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on and share a little bit about your journey and to geek out a little bit about some of the marketing opportunities that are available for indie artists. And I think it's really important to be able to have conversations like this, kind of to share awareness of some of the things. And speaking of, kind of spreading awareness and you're talking about the tools that are available, could you share a little bit more about EmuBands and the platform you've built and who do you say is like the best candidate for using the platform that would get the most value from it? And if they're interested in exploring it, where can they go to learn more?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Like we provide a kind of multifaceted solution. We at our core it is like digital distribution. So yeah, if you want to get your music online and you want to do that quickly and you want to do it cheaply and you want to retain all of your rights and all of your royalties, you can use us and we will do that for you. We'll do all the things that we say we're going to do. And it's super cheap, right? It's a one-time fee per release. So you're not tied into paying us year after year just to keep your music online. So that's like $12.50 for the US listeners, which is £10 in the UK. So that's basically what it costs. And if you want anything else, so like we provide a kind of pro solution, which is, I would say, somewhere between that DIY offering and like a fully fledged label services sort of offering. Like we're not doing rev shares or anything like that. I just wanted to provide a solution for artists and labels who need that little bit extra support in their teams. So we have this add-on service called EmuBands Pro. There's a subscription to EmuBands Pro, but you pays for the pro services, and I'll explain what that is. But it's not a subscription-based distribution service. So if you stop paying the subscription, your music remains live on stores. You still keep 100% of the royalties. We'll still be around to chat if you need some help because you paid that setup fee per release, right? So EmuBands Pro gives you like a dedicated account manager, think of that as like a release manager at a record label or something like that, that's going to help you with anything relating to your account, anything relating to the distribution process, and they can also lean in and help you with marketing strategy. So they're available via direct email. They'll get back to you within one business day. If you need to book like a face-to-face video call, you can just do that. There's no extra costs. And there's a live chat system on the dashboard, and you're speaking to directly to the arts relations team. We're not outsourcing support or anything like that. They'll also work with you on building compelling playlist pitches. So we're in weekly conversations with editors at Apple, Deezer, Spotify, Tidal, etc., to pitch your artist music, and we're pretty successful at that. There's no guarantees, but like we time and time again, we're sort of helping people land playlists for the first time ever, which is great, and sort of building on those successes from previous campaigns. We can also help with fan data collection through pre-save campaigns. We can sort of advise you on how to incentivize those campaigns as well, giving your fan base, something in return for giving their email address or pre-saving your release or something like that. In terms of who's it best suited for, right? Like I think we work with everyone from DIY artists who are just starting out, people making music in their bedroom who don't have a network and they need someone to, that they can really rely on to speak with about all of it, right? Because there's just so many questions attached to distribution. So that's probably like the bread and butter of EmuBands is kind of like people who are doing it all on their own and they need a partner in that space. So we help them with that. But at the same time, with our kind of pro offering, like we work with, I would say, like indie artists who are really at the top of their game. And then we also work with heritage artists, household names who are getting their rights back from major labels, and we'll work with them on catalog marketing and things like that. So yeah, we work with a super exciting indie band in the UK called the Royalties in January this year through EmuBands Pro. They also really understand how to speak to their audience. So I'm not taking the credit for it, but they got a #1 record in the UK. So like it's, doing that all on their own, in January. So yeah, it's this sort of these kind of success stories that really drive my work.
That's incredible. Wow. Awesome. Well, like always, we'll put the links in the show notes for easy access. And Toni, it was great having you on the podcast. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me, Michael.
Yeah.